The morning sun beat down on the tarmac of Halston Air Force Base as Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell wiped sweat from her brow. At 34, she was one of the most experienced weapons technicians on the base, especially when it came to the A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, as everyone called it. Today, like most days, she was performing maintenance on the massive 30mm GAU-8 Avenger cannon, the aircraft's signature weapon. "You missed a spot, Mitchell," called Master Sergeant Winters as he strolled past, clipboard in hand. He didn't stop to point out where, just continued walking with a smirk that Sarah had come to know all too well over the past 18 months. Sarah took a deep breath and continued her work. She'd learned to let comments like that roll off her back. After 12 years in the Air Force, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, she'd heard it all. The military had come a long way with women in technical roles, but there were still men like Winters who couldn't seem to accept that a woman could excel at maintaining the most fearsome close air support aircraft in the arsenal. "Don't let him get to you," said Airman Jessica Rodriguez, who was helping Sarah with the maintenance check. "He does that to everyone." "Not everyone," Sarah replied quietly. "Just watch how he talks to Andrews and Diaz." Both were male technicians with less experience than Sarah. Rodriguez nodded, understanding perfectly. At 24, she was newer to the service but had already noticed the pattern. "Well, I'm glad you're teaching me. I've learned more from you in 3 months than from anyone else on this base." Sarah smiled, appreciating the comment. Mentoring younger airmen, especially women interested in aircraft maintenance, gave her a sense of purpose. "Hand me that torque wrench, will you?" As they continued working, Sarah's mind wandered back to her first deployment. She'd been so eager to prove herself, to show that women could handle the physical and mental demands of maintaining combat aircraft in a war zone. That deployment had changed her life in ways she never expected. "Earth to Mitchell." Rodriguez waved a hand in front of Sarah's face. "You went somewhere else for a minute there." "Sorry, just thinking about my first deployment." Sarah tightened the last bolt and stepped back to examine their work. "This bird's ready for her test fire tomorrow." After completing their checklist, they headed to the hangar. The massive structure housed several A-10's in various states of maintenance, the smell of hydraulic fluid and metal filling the air. For Sarah, it smelled like home. Technical Sergeant Alan Cooper approached as they entered. Cooper was one of the good ones. He'd always judged Sarah on her abilities, not her gender. "Mitchell, glad I caught you. Colonel Bryant wants all section heads at a briefing at 1400 hours. What's it about?" Sarah asked, checking her watch. It was nearly noon. "Inspection," Cooper said, lowering his voice. "Word is Brigadier General Harrington is making a visit next week. Full review of the squadron." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Inspections were always stressful, but a brigadier general meant everything would be under even more scrutiny. "Thanks for the heads up." After Cooper left, Rodriguez looked at Sarah with wide eyes. "A general? Is that normal?" "Not really," Sarah admitted. "Usually it's just the wing commander. Must be something important." The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Sarah attended the briefing, where Colonel Bryant confirmed the upcoming inspection and emphasized the importance of having everything in perfect order. After the meeting, Winters cornered her in the hallway. "Mitchell, I'll be doing a pre-inspection of your section tomorrow morning. I expect everything to be flawless." His tone made it clear he was hoping to find something wrong. "It will be, Master Sergeant," Sarah replied, keeping her voice level. "It better be. I don't want General Harrington getting the wrong impression of how we run things here." Sarah bit back the retort that sprang to her lips. Winters had been riding her since he transferred to Halston 18 months ago. He'd never said it outright, but she knew he didn't think women belonged in weapons maintenance. That evening, Sarah drove home to her small apartment in the town of Oak Ridge, just outside the base. The desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples as she pulled into the parking lot. Her neighbor, Mrs. Keller, waved from her porch. Working late again, Sarah, the elderly woman called. Big inspection coming up, Sarah explained, pausing at the bottom of Mrs. Keller's steps. How are you feeling today? Oh, better now. My son finally called. He's coming to visit next month. Mrs. Keller's face lit up at the prospect. Sarah smiled genuinely. That's wonderful news. After chatting a few more minutes, Sarah headed to her apartment. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom with basic furniture, but the walls were covered with photos of aircraft and friends from various deployments. One shelf held her medals and commendations, including a Bronze Star that few people knew about. She rarely talked about how she earned it. As she made a simple dinner, her phone rang. It was her older sister, Jenny. Hey, sis, Sarah answered, tucking the phone against her shoulder as she stirred pasta on the stove. How's my favorite airplane mechanic? Jenny's voice was warm and familiar. I'm a weapons systems technician, not a mechanic, Sarah corrected automatically, though she was smiling. And I'm fine. Big inspection coming up. You always ace those. Remember when Dad used to inspect our rooms when we were kids? Sarah laughed. Dad was tougher than any military inspector I've ever met. They talked for 20 minutes, catching up on family news. Their father, a Vietnam veteran, had passed away 5 years ago, but their mother still lived in their hometown in Ohio. Jenny had 2 kids now, a boy and a girl, both in elementary school. Mom wants to know when you're coming to visit, Jenny said eventually. Hopefully for Thanksgiving, if I can get the leave approved. After they hung up, Sarah ate her dinner while reviewing technical manuals. Even after years of working on the A-10 systems, she never stopped studying. Technology evolved, procedures changed, and she was determined to stay at the top of her game. Later, as she prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about the upcoming inspection. The name Harrington sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. There were many generals in the Air Force, and their paths rarely crossed with enlisted personnel like her. Sarah's mind drifted to her time in Afghanistan. Her unit had been attached to a forward operating base, maintaining the A-10’s that provided close air support for ground troops. The work had been intense, long hours in difficult conditions, sometimes with hostile fire in the background. But she'd found purpose there, knowing that her meticulous attention to the aircraft's weapons systems might save American lives. There had been one night, during her second tour, when the base came under attack. Sarah had been working late in the maintenance hangar when the first mortars hit. What followed was chaos, explosions, gunfire, shouts for medics. Sarah had helped evacuate wounded personnel to the bunkers, then returned to help secure the aircraft. She remembered the weight of a rifle in her hands, so different from the tools she usually carried. The memories made her reach for the small wooden box on her nightstand. Inside was a patch, not an official Air Force patch, but a custom one created by the Special Operations Unit that had been on the base that night. They'd given it to her afterward, along with a letter of commendation. The patch showed a falcon with lightning bolts in its talons against a dark blue background, with the words, "Silent Guardians," embroidered beneath. Sarah ran her thumb over the embroidery, remembering the faces of the men she'd helped that night. Few people knew the story behind the patch, and she preferred it that way. She wasn't looking for recognition, she had simply done what needed to be done. She placed the patch on her uniform for the next day, as she always did. It wasn't regulation, strictly speaking, but her previous commanders had allowed it as a morale patch. Winters had questioned it once, but she'd simply said it was from a previous deployment, and he hadn't pushed further. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah wondered about the inspection. Something told her this visit from General Harrington might be different, but she couldn't have possibly imagined just how much it would change everything. The week leading up to General Harrington's inspection transformed Halston Air Force Base. Everywhere Sarah looked, airmen were power washing equipment, polishing floors, and triple-checking inventory. Even the most laid-back officers suddenly became perfectionists, scrutinizing every detail of their sections. For the weapons maintenance team, the pressure was particularly intense. Their work directly impacted flight safety and combat effectiveness, two areas any inspecting general would examine closely. "Mitchell, I need you to run a complete systems check on all the cannons again," Master Sergeant Winters ordered during morning roll call. "And I want full documentation. Every single step." Sarah nodded professionally, though inside she seethed. She had already completed those checks 2 days ago, with perfect documentation as always. This was just Winters finding ways to keep her busy with repetitive tasks. "Rodriguez, you'll be assisting Staff Sergeant Andrews with the missile systems presentation for the General," Winters continued. Sarah caught the flash of disappointment on Rodriguez's face. The younger woman had been helping Sarah with the cannon maintenance for months and had developed significant expertise, more than Andrews had with the missile systems. After roll call, Rodriguez approached Sarah. "I should be helping you with the cannons. Andrews barely knows which end of a missile is which." "It's fine," Sarah assured her, though she didn't believe it herself. "This is how Winters operates. He's trying to keep me busy so I won't be visible during the inspection. But that's not fair. You're the best weapons tech on this base." Sarah smiled at the young airman's loyalty. "Just help Andrews the best you can. Don't let Winters get to you." Throughout the day, Sarah methodically went through each A-10’s cannon system again. The GAU-8 Avenger was an engineering marvel, a 7-barrel Gatling-type cannon that could fire 3,900 rounds per minute, decimating tanks and armored vehicles with its depleted uranium rounds. Each system was complex and required meticulous attention, which Sarah provided despite knowing her work would likely go unnoticed. During her lunch break, she sat alone in a corner of the mess hall, reviewing technical diagrams on her tablet. Technical Sergeant Cooper spotted her and came over. "Winters has you doing busy work, doesn't he?" Cooper asked, setting down his tray. Sarah shrugged. "It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal. Everyone knows you should be front and center during this inspection. You know these systems better than anyone." "Thanks, but I've learned to pick my battles." Cooper lowered his voice. "You know, I served with General Harrington back in 2014, during Operation Enduring Freedom. He's not like some of these other brass. He actually cares about the enlisted personnel who keep everything running." Sarah's hand froze halfway to her water bottle. "You served with him in Afghanistan?" "Yeah, at FOB Condor. He was a colonel then, commanding the 455th Air Expeditionary Wing." Sarah felt her heart rate quicken. FOB Condor. That name still appeared in her dreams sometimes. What was he like? Fair. Tough but fair. He led from the front, too. Was actually there during that big attack in May 2014. Sarah nodded, her mind racing back to that night. The explosions. The shouting. The weight of a wounded soldier as she helped carry him to safety. "You okay, Mitchell? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Just thinking about all the work I still need to do." When Cooper left, Sarah sat motionless, memories washing over her. She hadn't known the commanding officer's name during that attack, there hadn't been time for introductions in the chaos. But if Harrington had been in command at FOB Condor, he might remember what happened that night. What she did. The thought made her both hopeful and uneasy. She'd never sought recognition for her actions, but the idea that someone might finally acknowledge them after all these years was strangely compelling. Back at the hangar, Sarah threw herself into her work with renewed focus. By late afternoon, she had completely rechecked 4 of the 6 A-10’s assigned to her. As she worked on the 5th aircraft, her mind kept drifting back to Afghanistan. She'd been assigned to a maintenance unit supporting A-10’s at FOB Condor. The base was relatively secure, but still within range of insurgent mortar attacks. On May 15, 2014, she had been working late, troubleshooting an issue with one of the aircraft's cannon systems. The first mortar hit just after 2200 hours, landing near the ammunition depot. The explosion had rocked the entire base, and Sarah remembered the sudden transition from peaceful night to chaotic battlefield. More mortars followed, and then small arms fire as insurgents launched a ground assault on the base's perimeter. Sarah had helped evacuate wounded personnel to the bunkers, and then, instead of staying there as ordered, she'd returned to help defend the aircraft. The maintenance hangar was dangerously close to a section of perimeter fence that had been breached. With security forces stretched thin, Sarah and 3 other maintenance personnel had grabbed rifles and taken defensive positions. What followed was the longest night of her life. For nearly 3 hours, they held their position, preventing insurgents from reaching the valuable aircraft. Sarah had never fired her weapon outside of training before that night, but when the moment came, her hands had been steady. "Mitchell! Are you daydreaming over there?" Winter's sharp voice yanked her back to the present. He was standing at the nose of the aircraft, glaring at her. "No, Master Sergeant. Just double-checking the feed mechanism." "Well, hurry it up. Colonel Bryant wants a full report by 1800 hours." After Winters left, Sarah exhaled slowly. She had never told anyone at Halston about that night at FOB Condor. The official report had mentioned maintenance personnel assisting in base defense, but names had been redacted in the unclassified version. The Special Operations Unit that had eventually secured the perimeter had given her the patch as a token of thanks, along with a letter of commendation that few people had ever seen. By the end of the day, Sarah was exhausted but satisfied with her work. Each cannon system had been thoroughly checked, cleaned, and documented. As she was completing her final report, Rodriguez found her. "Sarah, have you seen the schedule for the General's inspection tomorrow?" "Not yet." "Why?" "Winters has you assigned to the tool room during the weapons systems demonstration. You won't even be on the floor when the General comes through." Sarah felt a flash of anger but quickly suppressed it. "That's not surprising. But it's not right. You did all this work, and he's going to have Andrews explain the cannon systems to the General." "Andrews is good at what he does," Sarah said diplomatically. "Not as good as you, and everyone knows it." That night, as Sarah drove home, she wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to confront Winters about his obvious attempt to sideline her. Another part wondered if she should try to be present when General Harrington came through, just to see if he might recognize her, or more specifically, her patch. But the sensible part of her, the part that had survived 12 years in the military by choosing her battles carefully, argued for patience. Making a scene would only reinforce the stereotype of the emotional female that people like Winters already believed. Mrs. Keller was watering her plants when Sarah arrived home. "You look troubled, dear," the older woman observed. "Just work stress. Big inspection tomorrow." "Ah," Mrs. Keller nodded knowingly. "My Harold was in the Navy for 30 years. I remember how he'd get before inspections. Like a cat on hot bricks." Sarah smiled at the description. "That sounds about right. He always said the same thing, though. Do your job right every day, and inspection day is just another day. Your husband was a wise man." "He had his moments," Mrs. Keller chuckled. "Will you join me for tea? I made snickerdoodles." The invitation was tempting, but Sarah shook her head. "Rain check. I need to review some manuals before tomorrow." Inside her apartment, Sarah opened her closet and pulled out a small fireproof box from the back corner. Inside were important documents, her birth certificate, her father's flag from his military funeral, and an envelope marked FOB Condor, May 15, 2014. She opened the envelope carefully and removed several items: the original, Silent Guardians, patch. She wore a replica on her uniform, a handwritten letter from Captain Marcus Reed of the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, and a copy of the after-action report with most sections heavily redacted. The letter was brief but powerful. Captain Reed had thanked her for her exceptional courage under fire, and noted that her actions had directly contributed to preventing catastrophic damage to valuable air assets and likely saved numerous lives. He'd included the patch, he wrote, because, you may not be one of us officially, but you showed the same spirit and courage as any operator I've served with. Sarah had treasured the letter, reading it on difficult days when Winters or others like him made her question her place in the Air Force. It reminded her that she had proven herself where it mattered most, not in peacetime inspections, but in the crucible of combat. She carefully returned the items to the envelope and the box, then spent an hour reviewing the technical specifications of the A-10's weapon systems. Even though Winters had assigned her to the tool room, she would be prepared if, by some chance, her knowledge was needed. As she finally prepared for bed, Sarah found herself wondering about General Harrington. Would he remember that night? Would he recognize her patch if he saw it? And what would it mean if he did? Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of explosions and the distant chatter of gunfire. Inspection day dawned clear and bright, the Arizona sun already promising scorching heat by mid-morning. Sarah arrived at the base an hour early, her uniform crisp and perfect, her boots polished to a mirror shine. The patch, as always, was in its place on the right side of her chest, not part of the official uniform, but positioned where it wouldn't interfere with regulation insignia. The base hummed with nervous energy. Airmen hurried to their stations, officers reviewed checklists, and everyone kept glancing at the main gate, anticipating the general's arrival. "Mitchell, you're on tool room duty," Winters reminded her as she entered the hangar. "Make sure everything is perfectly organized and accounted for." "Yes, Master Sergeant," Sarah replied, keeping her voice neutral. The tool room was essentially a glorified storage closet, important for tracking specialized equipment, but hardly where you'd want to be during a high-profile inspection. As Sarah began verifying inventory, she could hear the rest of the maintenance team preparing for their demonstrations. Technical Sergeant Cooper poked his head in around 0830. "This is garbage," he said without preamble. "You should be out there explaining the cannon systems." Sarah shrugged. "Orders are orders. Winters is afraid you'll make him look bad. Everyone knows it." "It's fine, Cooper." "Really?" He looked like he wanted to say more but was interrupted by a commotion outside. "He's here," Cooper said, glancing over his shoulder. "General's convoy just pulled up." Sarah felt an unexpected flutter of nerves. "Good luck out there." "Yeah, thanks." Cooper hesitated, then added, "If I get a chance, I'm going to mention your work on the cannons." Before she could respond, he was gone. Sarah continued her inventory, but found herself straining to hear what was happening in the main hangar area. She could make out Colonel Bryant's voice, followed by Winter's more nasal tone, but couldn't distinguish words. Minutes stretched into an hour as the inspection party moved through different sections of the facility. Sarah tried to focus on her task, but kept wondering if the general would remember that night at FOB Condor, and if anyone would mention her name. A sudden commotion interrupted her thoughts. Raised voices came from the hangar, followed by hurried footsteps. Sarah stepped to the tool room doorway just as Colonel Bryant appeared, looking concerned. "Mitchell. There you are. We need you in Bay 3 immediately." "Sir." Sarah was confused. "There's an issue with Warthog 5's cannon system. Andrews can't figure it out, and the general wants to see a firing test." Sarah followed the colonel quickly, noting the stress in his stride. As they approached Bay 3, she could see a cluster of officers surrounding one of the A-10's. Among them was a tall man with silver hair and general stars on his shoulders, his back currently to her. "Sir, I found Staff Sergeant Mitchell," the colonel announced as they approached. The group parted, and Sarah found herself face to face with Brigadier General James Harrington. He was older than she expected, perhaps in his late 50s, with a weathered face that spoke of many deployments. His eyes were sharp and assessing as they fell on her. "Staff Sergeant, we seem to have an issue with this aircraft's cannon system," the general said. "During the pre-check, the firing circuit is showing an anomaly. Your Staff Sergeant Andrews believes it may be in the feeder assembly, but hasn't been able to isolate it. I'll take a look, sir, Sarah said confidently. As she moved to the aircraft, she caught Winter's expression, a mixture of anger and anxiety. Clearly, having to call her in was not part of his plan. Sarah climbed into the maintenance position and began checking the weapon system methodically. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, every motion the result of years of experience. As she worked, she could hear the general asking questions about the aircraft's capabilities and maintenance requirements. After about 10 minutes, Sarah identified the problem, a misaligned contact switch in the firing circuit that was causing erratic readings. It was a subtle issue that might be missed by someone less familiar with the system's idiosyncrasies. I found it, sir, she called down. Misaligned contact in the primary firing circuit. I can have it fixed in about 15 minutes. Proceed, Staff Sergeant, the general replied. As Sarah worked to correct the problem, she was acutely aware of being watched, not just by the general, but by Winters, Colonel Bryant, and several other officers. The pressure might have bothered some, but Sarah had worked under much worse conditions. True to her word, 15 minutes later she had the system fully operational. Ready for testing, sir, she announced as she climbed down from the aircraft. Excellent work, Staff Sergeant, Colonel Bryant said, visible relief in his voice. The inspection party moved to the control room, where the cannon could be tested without actually firing live rounds. Sarah explained the diagnostic procedure clearly and concisely, noting the satisfaction in the general's expression as the system performed flawlessly. Very impressive troubleshooting, Staff Sergeant, General Harrington said when the test concluded. Where did you learn to work on these systems with such efficiency? 12 years of experience, sir. Including 2 deployments to Afghanistan with the 455th Air Expeditionary Wing. Something flickered in the general's eyes, interest, perhaps, or the beginning of recognition. The 455th, you say? When were you deployed? 2012 to 2013 and then 2014 to 2015, sir. I was stationed at FOB Condor during my second tour. The general's gaze sharpened, and for the first time, he seemed to truly look at her, not just as a technician, but as a person. His eyes dropped briefly to her chest, where the Silent Guardians patch was visible against her uniform. And then it happened. General Harrington froze, his eyes fixed on the patch. The conversation around them continued for a moment before people began to notice the general's sudden stillness. Sir. Is everything all right? Colonel Bryant asked. The general didn't respond immediately. He was staring at the patch, then at Sarah's face, recognition dawning in his eyes. That patch, he finally said, his voice quieter than before. Where did you get it? The hangar had gone silent. Sarah stood straight, meeting the general's gaze directly. It was given to me at FOB Condor, sir. May 15, 2014. The date hung in the air between them. Sarah could see in the general's eyes that he remembered exactly what had happened that night. You were there, he said, not as a question but as a realization. You were one of the maintenance personnel who held the south perimeter. Yes, sir. The general's expression changed, a mixture of respect and something like guilt crossing his features. Walk with me, Staff Sergeant Mitchell, he said, then turned to Colonel Bryant. Colonel, we'll resume the inspection in 30 minutes. Bewildered looks passed among the officers as General Harrington led Sarah away from the group, toward a quieter corner of the hangar. Winters looked particularly confused and concerned, watching them go with narrowed eyes. When they were out of earshot, the general turned to face her. I remember that night very clearly, Staff Sergeant. We were hit hard, casualties mounting, and our perimeter was in danger of being overrun. For maintenance personnel held a critical section for nearly 3 hours until special operations could reinforce them. He paused, studying her face. One of them was a female staff sergeant who, according to reports, showed exceptional courage under fire. We all did what was necessary, sir, Sarah said modestly. You did more than that. You saved lives and prevented the destruction of several aircraft. The general's voice carried genuine admiration. But what I don't understand is why you're wearing that patch, which I know was given by the 24th Special Tactics Squadron to those who fought alongside them, yet your record shows no commendation for that night. Sarah hesitated, uncertain how much to say. The after-action report mentioned maintenance personnel, sir, but not by name. The Special Tactics team gave me the patch and a letter of appreciation informally. But no official recognition. No combat action medal or commendation. No, sir. The general's face darkened slightly. That's not right. I signed off on recommendations for medals for all personnel involved in defending the base that night. Sarah didn't know how to respond to that. For years, she'd assumed the lack of official recognition was simply how things had played out, perhaps her actions hadn't been deemed significant enough in the larger context of the attack. Staff Sergeant, I believe something went wrong here, the general continued. And I intend to find out what. But first, tell me, how did you end up assigned to tool room duty today instead of demonstrating the weapons systems you so clearly understand? The question put Sarah in a difficult position. She didn't want to appear to be complaining about her superior, but the general was asking directly. Master Sergeant Winters assigned me there for the inspection, sir. I follow my orders. I see. The general's tone suggested he understood more than her words conveyed. And is this a normal assignment for someone with your expertise? I go where I'm needed, sir. General Harrington nodded slowly, a decision forming behind his eyes. Well, Staff Sergeant Mitchell, I believe you're needed back in the inspection party. And afterward, I think you and I need to have a longer conversation about what happened at FOB Condor, and what happened afterward. As they walked back to rejoin the group, Sarah felt a strange mixture of emotions, vindication, certainly, but also apprehension. Whatever had prevented her actions from being officially recognized was about to be uncovered, and she wasn't entirely sure she was prepared for what that might mean. The general addressed the group as they returned. Change of plans, gentlemen. Staff Sergeant Mitchell will be accompanying us for the remainder of the inspection to provide technical expertise on the weapons systems. Winter's face flushed red, but he said nothing as the general continued the inspection with Sarah now part of the official party. Throughout the next 2 hours, the general repeatedly directed technical questions to Sarah, giving her the opportunity to demonstrate her knowledge and expertise. By the time the inspection concluded, it was clear to everyone that something significant had changed. The general had recognized Sarah, not just as a capable technician, but as someone who had served with distinction in combat. And he seemed determined to understand why that distinction had never been officially acknowledged. As the inspection party began to disperse, General Harrington turned to Colonel Bryant. Colonel, I'd like to see Staff Sergeant Mitchell's complete service record. And I want to speak with her privately in your office. Of course, sir, the colonel replied, though he looked puzzled. Winters, standing nearby, shifted uncomfortably. For the first time since Sarah had known him, he looked uncertain, perhaps even worried. As she followed the general and the colonel toward the headquarters building, Sarah realized that her world was about to change, all because she had been cleaning an A-10's cannon when the general recognized her patch and froze. Colonel Bryant's office felt unusually small with 3 people in it. General Harrington sat behind the desk, reviewing Sarah's service record with a deepening frown. Colonel Bryant stood by the window, visibly uncomfortable, while Sarah sat at attention in a chair across from the general. Exemplary evaluations throughout your career, General Harrington noted, flipping through the file. Technical expertise consistently rated as outstanding. Yet I see no record of any combat commendation from Afghanistan. He looked up at Sarah. Nothing in your official record about the night of May 15, 2014. No, sir, Sarah confirmed. The general set down the file and leaned back. Staff Sergeant, I need you to tell me exactly what happened that night, from your perspective. Everything you remember. Sarah took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. She hadn't talked about that night in detail for years. I was working late in Hangar 2, troubleshooting a feed problem on one of the A-10’s. Around 2,200 hours, we heard the first explosions. Initial reports indicated mortar fire targeting the ammunition depot and perimeter defenses. As she spoke, the memories came back with startling clarity, the sudden chaos, the shouting, the smell of smoke and cordite in the air. Base security ordered all non-combat personnel to the bunkers. I helped evacuate some wounded from near the maintenance area, but then. She hesitated. Go on, the general encouraged. I heard that the south perimeter was being breached near the aircraft hangars. Most of security was responding to the main attack on the east side. I knew those A-10’s were critical assets that couldn't be replaced easily, and there weren't enough personnel defending that section. So what did you do? The general asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. 3 other maintenance personnel and I retrieved weapons from the armory and took defensive positions at the south perimeter fence. Technical Sergeant Wilson, Staff Sergeant Rivera, Airman Chen, and myself. You voluntarily took up a combat position, despite orders to shelter. Yes, sir. We couldn't let them reach those aircraft. Sarah described the next 3 hours in careful detail, how they had used maintenance equipment to create makeshift barricades, how they had coordinated their fields of fire to cover the perimeter breach, and how they had repelled several attempts by insurgents to penetrate further into the base. Around 0100 hours, a special operations team arrived to reinforce our position. That's when I met Captain Reed of the 24th Special Tactics Squadron. They secured the perimeter and we were ordered back to the bunkers. The general nodded. I remember the after-action briefing. Captain Reed specifically mentioned 4 maintenance personnel who had held that position against significant enemy pressure. He recommended all 4 for Bronze Stars with combat VEET devices. Sarah's surprise must have shown on her face. You didn't know that, the general observed. No, sir. After the attack, Captain Reed gave me the patch and a letter thanking me for our assistance. But I never heard anything about an official commendation. General Harrington turned to Colonel Bryant. This doesn't make sense, Colonel. I personally signed off on those recommendations. For Bronze Stars for maintenance personnel who went above and beyond to defend critical assets. Yet there's no record of it in Staff Sergeant Mitchell's file. Colonel Bryant looked increasingly uncomfortable. Perhaps there was an administrative error, sir. Combat paperwork sometimes falls through cracks. The general's expression hardened. For identical administrative errors? I find that unlikely. He turned back to Sarah. What happened after you returned to the States? I was transferred here to Halston about 3 years ago, sir. Before that, I was at Davis-Monthan in Arizona. And the other maintenance personnel who were with you that night? Do you know what happened to them? Sarah nodded. Technical Sergeant Wilson retired last year. Staff Sergeant Rivera is now a Master Sergeant at Eglin Air Force Base. Airman Chen left the service after his enlistment ended. The general made notes on a pad. I intend to check their records as well. He looked up at Sarah with a piercing gaze. Staff Sergeant, is there anyone who might have had reason to intercept or block recognition of your actions that night? The question caught Sarah off guard. I wouldn't know, sir. Think carefully. In my experience, commendation paperwork doesn't simply vanish without reason. Sarah hesitated, reluctant to speculate or make accusations. But as she considered the general's question, a memory surfaced, one she had almost forgotten. There was one thing, sir. When I returned from that deployment, my squadron commander was Lieutenant Colonel Philip Winters. Any relation to your current Master Sergeant Winters? His older brother, sir. The general's eyebrows rose. Colonel Bryant made a small sound of surprise by the window. Lieutenant Colonel Winters and I had a professional disagreement earlier in the deployment, Sarah continued carefully. He believed women shouldn't be assigned to forward operating bases, especially in maintenance roles for combat aircraft. He felt we lacked the physical and emotional capacity for the environment. I see, the general said, his voice neutral but his eyes sharp. And after the attack? Did his attitude change? No, sir. If anything, he seemed more determined to prove his point. He assigned me to secondary duties, away from the aircraft. When I raised concerns about being sidelined despite my experience, he said I was emotionally unstable following combat exposure. General Harrington's jaw tightened. And you believe he might have intercepted the commendation paperwork? I can't say for certain, sir. But he was in the administrative chain for such recommendations. The general made another note, then looked at Colonel Bryant. Colonel, I want to see Lieutenant Colonel Philip Winters' service record as well. And I want Master Sergeant Winters in this office in 30 minutes. Yes, sir, Bryant replied, moving quickly to the door. After the colonel left, the general's expression softened slightly. Staff Sergeant Mitchell, I owe you an apology. The United States Air Force owes you an apology. What you did that night deserved recognition, not suppression. Thank you, sir, but I didn't do it for recognition. Of course you didn't. The best never do. He studied her for a moment. Tell me about your experience here at Halston. Has Master Sergeant Winters treated you fairly? Sarah chose her words carefully. Master Sergeant Winters is professionally correct in his interactions with me. That's a diplomatic answer, Staff Sergeant. I'm asking for honesty, not diplomacy. Sarah straightened in her chair. Honestly, sir. No. Master Sergeant Winters has consistently assigned me to duties below my skill level, questioned my technical judgments without basis, and excluded me from opportunities that would normally be given to someone with my experience and evaluations. Like today's inspection? Yes, sir. The general nodded thoughtfully. And have you filed any formal complaints? No, sir. I believed I could best address the situation by continuing to perform my duties to the highest standard. And she hesitated. And I was concerned that a formal complaint might be seen as confirming the emotional instability narrative that followed me from my previous assignment. Understanding dawned in the general's eyes. A double bind. If you complained, you'd be proving their point about women being too emotional. If you didn't complain, the behavior continued unchecked. Something like that, sir. Before the general could respond further, there was a knock at the door. Colonel Bryant entered, followed by Master Sergeant Winters, who came to attention as he saw the general. Master Sergeant Winters reporting as ordered, sir. At ease, Master Sergeant, the general said, though his tone was noticeably cooler than it had been with Sarah. I have some questions for you regarding Staff Sergeant Mitchell's assignments and duties. Winters glanced briefly at Sarah, then back to the general. I'm happy to answer any questions, sir. Excellent. First, why was Staff Sergeant Mitchell assigned to the tool room during today's inspection, rather than demonstrating the weapon systems she clearly understands better than anyone else in your section? Winters swallowed visibly. I believed Staff Sergeant Andrews was better prepared for the demonstration, sir. And tool room accountability is a critical function during inspections. Better prepared? Despite the fact that he couldn't diagnose the cannon issue that Staff Sergeant Mitchell solved in under 15 minutes. That was an unexpected technical problem, sir. Indeed. The general leaned forward. Master Sergeant, are you aware that your brother, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Winters, was Staff Sergeant Mitchell's squadron commander during her deployment to Afghanistan in 2014? Winters stiffened slightly. Yes, sir. My brother mentioned he had served with Staff Sergeant Mitchell. Did he share his opinions of her with you? A hesitation. He may have mentioned some concerns about her performance. I see. And did these concerns influence your treatment of Staff Sergeant Mitchell since her arrival at Halston? No, sir. I treat all personnel under my command according to their demonstrated abilities and the needs of the mission." The general's expression made it clear he didn't believe this statement. "Master Sergeant, are you aware that on May 15, 2014, Staff Sergeant Mitchell participated in the defense of FOB Condor during a significant enemy attack? That she and 3 other maintenance personnel held a critical perimeter position for 3 hours, likely saving both lives and irreplaceable aircraft?" Winters looked genuinely surprised. "I was not aware of those specific details, sir." "No, you wouldn't be," the general said coldly. "Because it appears that your brother deliberately suppressed the commendation paperwork that would have awarded Staff Sergeant Mitchell a Bronze Star with V device for valor in combat." The color drained from Winters' face. "Sir, I had no knowledge of." "I believe you, Master Sergeant," the general interrupted. "But I find it disturbing that you would allow your brother's biased assessment to influence your professional treatment of a decorated combat veteran under your command." "Decorated, sir?" Winters looked confused. "She will be," the general stated firmly. "I intend to correct this injustice immediately." He turned to Colonel Bryant. "Colonel, effective immediately, Master Sergeant Winters is relieved of his duties as Section Chief. Assign Technical Sergeant Cooper as Acting Section Chief pending a formal investigation." "Yes, sir," Colonel Bryant responded. "Master Sergeant, you are dismissed. Report to the First Sergeant for temporary reassignment while this matter is investigated." Winters looked like he wanted to protest but thought better of it. "Yes, sir," he said stiffly, before executing a perfect about-face and leaving the office. After he departed, the general turned back to Sarah. "Staff Sergeant Mitchell, I want you to know that I'm going to personally ensure that you and the others who defended FOB Condor that night receive the recognition you earned. It may take some time to process the paperwork, but it will happen." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said, feeling a complex mix of emotions: vindication, certainly, but also a strange sense of loss. For years, she had carried the weight of that night alone, without official acknowledgement. Now that it was coming to light, she wasn't entirely sure how to feel. The general seemed to sense her conflict. "Staff Sergeant, recognition doesn't change what you did or who you are. It simply ensures that others know the truth, that when it mattered most, you acted with courage and conviction." Sarah nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Now," the general continued, "I would like you to prepare a detailed statement about the events of May 15, 2014, as well as any instances of discrimination or unfair treatment you've experienced since. Colonel Bryant will provide you with the necessary forms and privacy to complete this task." "Yes, sir." As Sarah stood to leave, the general added one more thing. "Staff Sergeant, that patch you wear, the Silent Guardians, wear it with pride. You've earned it, perhaps more than you know." For the first time that day, Sarah smiled genuinely. "I will, sir. Thank you." As she left the colonel's office, Sarah felt as though a weight she had carried for years was finally beginning to lift. The truth about that night in Afghanistan was coming to light, and with it, perhaps a chance for her service to be truly acknowledged. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. The investigation would bring scrutiny and questions. Winters, both the Master Sergeant and his brother the Lieutenant Colonel, would likely fight back against any allegations of impropriety. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. 3 months passed like a whirlwind following General Harrington's inspection. For Sarah Mitchell, they were the most transformative months of her military career. The investigation into the suppressed commendations moved with unusual speed, spurred by the general's personal interest. Records were examined, witnesses interviewed, and a disturbing pattern of discrimination uncovered. Lieutenant Colonel Philip Winters had indeed intercepted the commendation paperwork for Sarah and the other maintenance personnel who had defended FOB Condor. His electronic correspondence, retrieved by Air Force investigators, revealed a deliberate effort to prevent Sarah in particular from receiving recognition that might contradict his views on women in combat support roles. "I can't believe he kept those emails," Technical Sergeant Cooper said to Sarah as they shared lunch in the base cafeteria one afternoon in late August. "What kind of idiot puts that kind of discrimination in writing?" "The kind who never expected anyone to look," Sarah replied. Cooper, who had been confirmed as the permanent replacement for Master Sergeant Winters, shook his head in disgust. "Well, he's facing a board of inquiry now. And his brother isn't doing much better." Master Sergeant Winters had been reassigned to the supply squadron pending the outcome of his own investigation. The evidence against him wasn't as clear-cut as his brother's, but his pattern of assignments and evaluations showed a clear bias against Sarah and other female technicians. "I don't take any pleasure in their troubles," Sarah said honestly. "I just wanted to be judged fairly for my work." "And now you will be," Cooper assured her. "Speaking of which, how's Rodriguez doing with the advanced systems training?" Sarah smiled. "Excelling, of course. She'll make an excellent team lead someday." The biggest change had come 2 weeks after the inspection, when Sarah received orders to report to the base commander's office. There she found Colonel Bryant and General Harrington, who had returned specifically for the occasion. Staff Sergeant Mitchell, the general had said, after reviewing all the evidence, the Secretary of the Air Force has approved the retroactive award of the Bronze Star Medal with V device for your actions on May 15, 2014. Sarah had stood speechless as the general read the citation detailing her extraordinary heroism in defending critical assets and personnel during the attack on FOB Condor. Furthermore, he continued, "In recognition of your technical expertise and leadership abilities, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Technical Sergeant, effective immediately." The promotion had been unexpected, a rare field promotion authorized by the general himself to partially compensate for the career advancement Sarah had been unfairly denied.